morning to all of you. Welcome to the fourth day of the FDP on recent advances in biosimilars development. Now we have Dr. U. Mahabalirajan with us to deliver a talk on biosimilars in lung diseases. As a brief introduction, Dr. Mahabalirajan is working as a senior scientist at the Molecular Pathobiology Lab in the Cell Biology and Physiology Division in the Indian Institute of Chemical Biology, CSIR Institute at Kolkata. He has done his MBBS from Dr. MGR Medical University, Tamil Nadu, and then followed by PhD from Department of Medicine in AIIMS, New Delhi. Then he has worked as various research positions, research officer at AIIMS, then research associate at University of Chicago, USA, where he worked on to find the involvement of T regulatory cells and dendritic cells in food allergy, and to find the role of Helminth infection in food allergy. And then he has done his postdoc at the Department of Pathology, AIIMS, Delhi. Then followed by his worked as a senior scientist in molecular pathobiology of respiratory diseases, where he is continuing as a senior scientist at present. His research interest is combining immunobiology with mitochondrial biology to dissect the mechanisms of epithelial cell dysfunction and develop mitochondrial medicine in respiratory diseases, and also to understand the basis of steroid resistance in asthma and COPD, to understand the molecular basis for the link between respiratory diseases and lung cancer, and to understand the basis of idiopathic lung fibrosis. As with a clinical background, he is working on various respiratory disorders. Today he will be delivering a talk on biosimilars in respiratory disorders. Over to you, Dr. Mahabalirajan.
Thank you, Dr. Somasundram, for a nice introduction. Thank you and good morning to all. So we'll start the presentation now. So, in between, if you have any doubt, please interrupt me, ask question freely. So based on my experience and the expertise, I'll be able to answer the question. So hope the slides are visible.
Yes, sir.
And, okay, perfect. So sometimes what happens, the slides may not move properly.
Yeah. Now we can check to make it full screen. Sometimes.
Yeah, this is full screen.
No. Here I can see only. Yeah.
Okay.
I think the slides will not move if it is like this.
Okay. Now the slides are moving or something?
Slides are moving, but not in slideshow mode. It is.
Oh, slideshow. Okay. Let me see how. Now it is in the slideshow mode. It's moving.
No, it's not in slideshow here. I think you have to quit and again you have to share.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
yes.
Fine. Okay. So I'm starting. Basically, as Dr. Somasundram said, that we work on a number of lung diseases, like preferably mostly working on like asthma, and we recently started working in other diseases like lung fibrosis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and lung cancer. A little bit about the thing. And this is an exciting topic, and I'm sure that in last few days you had got an opportunity to see the kind of to get familiarity with the biosimilars. So hopefully, I think we may have a diverse background, all of you. So as a result, I think so. If you see all the topic, I've seen that in this forum. So mostly it's a general aspect. Okay, so starting from what is biosimilar, what is the importance, I mean, the status of biosimilars in India and global status kind of thing. And this is a kind of little specific to the lung diseases. So as a result, because when it comes to a specific topic, there is a need to understand the particular lung disease specifically. So what I did that, so we'll be focusing mainly on asthma and few biosimilars that have been approved, that got approved a few years back, and giving a good background about the lung diseases, so that you'll be able to enjoy the presentation. How exactly biosimilars and other biologics are working in lung diseases. So basically, by this time, you might have understood that probably the biosimilars are not really like a generic drug. Because when you see the generic, definitely it is like made in laboratory. Okay, and when it comes to the biosimilars, even though the concept is like a generic, but see that it's entirely different from the generic drug, because here is not a made in laboratory. This is like a made in cell. You understand that made in laboratory means you can adjust the condition here and there. It's like an engineering technique. But if it is like a made in cell, cell will have a complicated procedure. So in between something will happen that we cannot control. So, but anyway, I think we'll be able to I mean, we have to control to get a similar properties of the reference drug. So by this time, I think you might have got a familiarity with the originator drug or reference product and what is biosimilar and many other things. And the importance of this particular aspect is you can understand that currently globally biosimilars, there are like more than 1,000 drugs got approved for this biosimilars in variety of diseases. Predominantly, the disease concern for biosimilar is the cancer. And other than cancer, some genetic diseases. So wherever the traditional tablet or pharmaceutical drugs is not going to work, conventional drugs are not going to work, there open the door for the biosimilars. Okay, and that opens the door for the biologic first. Okay, the biology, we understand that it's like antibody, vaccine, whatever the pharmaceutical preparation that uses a cellular aspect as a source platform to generate the medicine. So predominantly it's like recombinant proteins, monoclonal antibody, vaccine. These are all the biosimilars. And similar to global status, India, more than nearly 100 medicines had been approved for the biosimilar for variety of diseases, kind of. And that's an importance. Very importantly, this would be very boon for developing countries like India, because when you see, when the biological therapy had been introduced in the system, there was a huge expense. Okay, you can see that there's a huge expense is introduced. So as a result, there will be a lot of economical kind of a barrier for the poor countries. I mean, poor family, poor individual. And similarly, if so when it something is coming under the insurance, then the insurance company also should pay a huge amount of thing. So basically, this is a financial burden when the person is using the originator product or kind of biological therapy. Generally, almost every aspect in the kind of diseased or hospital setup, they got a financial burden. So except the manufacturers, but when originator is getting replaced by biosimilars, once the original patent got expired, obviously the drug, I mean the formula, the biosimilars cost is so much reduced drastically. I mean, almost 3 to 4 times cost is reduced. As a result, the financial burden is also reduced overall in the health setup, starting from the individual patient level to the country level. And that is an importance of the biosimilars. And that is the importance why we need to study more about, why we need to develop more and more biosimilars for developing countries like India. But India had developed, I mean, more than 1,000, I mean, sorry, more than 100 biosimilars in the last, maybe you can say that in the last a decade. Basically, this example for the cost reduction potential. So, this is a one case report kind of thing. What they did in this JAMA Internal Medicine authors, they had compared, there's one drug called adalimumab. Okay, the drug called adalimumab. This is a monoclonal antibody designed to inhibit the tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNF alpha. And this adalimumab and other TNF alpha inhibitors isn't the market for a long time to, I mean, it's a kind of biologic medicine, monoclonal antibody. It's a long time to treat a number of diseases, starting from Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, many other things. In fact, recently in COVID-19 also, people tried this TNF alpha antibody to reduce the severity, to reduce the mortality. Some level it worked. And for example, in this Denmark, they calculated both aspects. You see the panel. So left panel is about a number of medicine, number of vials that have been used in 1,000 pens kind of thing, you can see. And in the right panel, you can see what is the $1 million had been used. Since the introduction of the biologics, that is in the January 2017, and basically, I mean, it has been introduced long time back, but they calculated from January 2017 in the entire Denmark, okay, all the private and government hospitals, what are the consumption of this adalimumab? And you can see that from January 2017 to October 2018. So meaning that adalimumab, the patent got expired in October 2018. And here you can see that in this portion, a number of medicine have been used. The moment it got expired, at least 1 or 2 years back, people might have prepared this biosimilars for this adalimumab. The moment the patent got expired and it slowly and gradually replaced by this originator drug, replaced by this biosimilars, you can see that once it get replaced, in fact, a number of individuals that use this adalimumab biosimilar, they also increased. Okay, almost you can see that it's approximately 7,000 pens. Okay, so 7,000 pens. And when you see here, almost 14,000 pens started using, indicating that the cost is one of the barrier, such a way that the individual are not going to use this medicine kind of thing. On the other hand, drastically, even though the twice the number of adalimumab biosimilar have been used, almost thrice to 4 times reduction in the cost had taken place. So you can see here, till October 18, it's approximately $4.5 million have been used in October 2018. Slowly it is coming down, only $1 million. But the number of use is double, but the $1 million use is almost 4 to 5 times is reduced. And this is showing the importance of biosimilars in the aspect of the cost reduction potential. So when you see the cost saving potential for starting from any kind of health related aspect, health related setup, I think people, this particular paper is talking about how using biosimilars. So what are all the medicines available, biosimilar medicines available for a number of products. So basically what happens, you see that approximately the long-acting insulin and fast-acting insulin. And this, you know that the insulin is also a biological product. And in fact, this almost 26% of the entire saving is because of insulin only. So that this itself indicates that current biosimilar predominantly uses this insulin, okay, as a biosimilar. After this insulin, then there is a monoclonal antibody specifically for the cancer drugs, cancer diseases. Other than that, a number of other drugs are available that also saved financial burden. I mean, saved a lot of money in the biosimilars. So here you can see that anti-asthma and COPD is only a small amount, very simply because that asthma and COPD, meaning when you compare COPD, asthma, there are a lot of monoclonal antibodies available. Okay, But very recently only the COPD research had started using this biological therapy. So as a result, we cannot expect much biosimilars in COPD, but few biosimilars are already available for the asthma and lung cancer. Is a huge amount of market is available for the biosimilars for the lung cancer. So overall, I want to say that it's this biosimilars are having the cost reducing and saving potential. And that, so I introduce a biosimilars as a kind of recalling for you. And when you talk about the lung diseases, predominantly we can divide the lung diseases into either communicable lung diseases or infectious lung diseases, or non-communicable or non-infectious lung diseases. Okay. So here, when you talk about the non-communicable lung diseases or non-infectious, predominantly it comes like asthma, COPD, and lung fibrosis. These three diseases majorly coming. Other all the things like very kind of rare disease and the frequency is a little lower. When it comes to infectious diseases, you know very well that currently we are talking about this COVID-19. This is also a kind of infectious pulmonary disease. Okay. So here we'll be focusing mainly on this non-communicable lung diseases like asthma, lung cancer, lung fibrosis, a little bit touching on the COPD. So in between, if you have any question about the understanding of the lung diseases, please stop me. I'll be able to clarify and then go forward. Okay, so asthma, you know very well that asthma is a kind of allergic disease of lung in which patient who has asthma will have a difficulty in breathing. Basically, what happens when you see here, you can see this is a normal airway. Okay, so normal airway has a is a airway wall. You can see the diameter of this airway little, I mean, widen in case of normal individual. But in case of asthmatic patients, this lumen, airway lumen is getting constricted due to so many inflammatory phenomena that is happening in the airway. In addition to the inflammatory phenomena, there is a structural remodeling that constricts the airway in a chronic asthmatic patient. Basically, the asthmatic patient will have like wheezing, difficulty in breathing. On the other hand, COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Initially, people believed that cigarette smoke is one of the major cause, but now people start realizing that in addition to the cigarette smoke, there are multiple other factors, including air pollution, and in village kitchen, people, the village women use of the biomass fuel. So this biomass fuel also induces this COPD-like phenomena. And lung fibrosis is also a kind of one of the challenging lung disease in the lung research, because the moment the person got diagnosed with lung fibrosis, even in cancer, people talk about 5 years survival rate. But here in lung fibrosis, people talk about only 2 years survival rate. Once it comes, the mortality is very high. Okay, these are all the lung diseases. We'll be briefly focusing on it. You know very well that, I mean, I'll give a brief introduction about the respiratory system. The respiratory system starting from the nose, end in the alveoli. The alveoli is a functional unit of the lung. In fact, you can see that, in fact, the asthma is not a kind of lung disease. Basically, it is an airway disease. Basically, this is the entire airway. You may think that, you can see that there is a phenomena called physiological and anatomical dead volume. Every breath, we take approximately 500 ml air inside, and that is called tidal volume. When you exhale the air, this 500 ml air is coming outside. So this is a wonderful question. That is, are our system, whether our lung are able to use all this 500 ml in 100% efficiency or not? The answer is no. Only 350 ml of the air is better utilized for the gas exchange. Remaining 150 ml is never utilized for the gas exchange, because this 150 ml of the air simply remain in the airway. Then that's a question, why this a beautiful system? Every time after long, every breath, we waste 150 ml of the air. But this question can be answered by simple thing, and you can see that So the air has to travel almost 23 branches. For example, you can see that in human there is a 23 airway generation. In case of mice, there is a 6th generation. So it has to travel a number of, I mean, the lengthy pathway. Okay, and if you believe that this air is just a conducting pipe for the air, that's completely wrong. Because in addition to the conducting the air, it also kind of has a protective barrier, because we not only inhale the pure air, but the inhaled air contain number of pollutants, contaminants. Basically, these pollutants should be filtered out. So basically, I mean, in airway, there will be an anatomical and physiological and biochemical safeguards mechanisms are available. You see that sneezing, bronchospasm that happens in the asthma, and that is also kind of safeguards, such a way that, for example, even in asthma, there is a bronchospasm or constriction of the airway, indicating that this constriction is a kind of no entry signal for the allergen. Even though bronchospasm is beneficial by not allowing allergen and poisonous gases inside the lung, the same constriction does not allow the air as well. So as a result, to compensate this deficiency of the air entry, people start developing a difficulty in breathing by increasing the number of the respiratory rate kind of thing. So as a result, so basically I want to say that asthma and COPD, many other diseases, is a kind of extension of the physiology. Okay, there's a number of cell types are available in asthmatic airway and normal airway. And when he's talking about the asthma, so we will be primarily focusing on the biosimilar in asthma. Before that, for example, there is a biosimilar called amalizumab biosimilar, and this is largely used in asthmatic field. What it does basically, omalizumab biosimilar, what it does actually, what is this actually? Basically, it neutralizes the immunoglobulin E. Now you have a question: by neutralizing immunoglobulin E, how exactly patients are going to get a benefit? To understand this question, I'll give a brief background about this asthma and how this IgE is generated, from where it is generated, how it is generated, what is the intestinal pathway, and everything. And this IgE is linked with the bronchospasm or smooth muscle contraction. How exactly allergen exposure lead to increased IgE, and thus IgE lead to bronchospasm or airway narrowing. Okay, when you understand this kind of history, that will be very interesting to understand how exactly these drugs are going to work. In asthma, there are two kinds of asthma. One is atopic asthma, another one is a non-atopic asthma. Otherwise, we can say this is extrinsic or intrinsic, basically, but broadly classified into kind of atopic or hereditary. So when you see the 100 asthmatic patients, approximately 80% of the patients belong to hereditary. In the sense that if a patient is having asthmatic condition, definitely in that family, 1 or 2% or more than one person will have either asthma or any other allergic phenomena, starting from atopic dermatitis, atopic conjunctivitis, or atopic rhinitis. So there's a multiple allergic phenomena is there. So not necessarily if a patient is having asthma, so in that family also they will have, all people will have asthma. Not necessarily. Some people may have asthma. Some people may have a nasal allergy. Some people may have eye allergy. Some people may have a skin allergy, because there is a common genes are involved in most of the allergic diseases. But one of the common phenomena, one of the common factor for all these allergic diseases called IgE. Okay, and this biosimilar is about IgE only. Okay, and before understanding about this IgE, because you understand that the moment you talk about biosimilar, predominantly except recombinant proteins like insulin and all, the entire market is about the antibody, basically the monoclonal antibody. So if you want to understand the monoclonal antibody, the many of you may not have this immunology background. I'll give a brief background about immunology. The moment, suppose in our body have two kinds of responses. One is called humoral immune response, and that is basically mediated by antibody. Here, the humor means secretion. So, meaning this antibody can be found in the blood serum, and that is what is called humoral immune response, predominantly mediated by B cell converted into plasma cell. Plasma cell, start secreting immunoglobulin E, G. There are 5 types of antibodies. On the other hand, there is a cellular immune response. Okay, in the cell, you can see there are two major types of immunity. One is a helper immunity, that is a T helper immunity. Another one is a cytotoxic immunity. And this cytotoxic immunity is important for the viral diseases, or some level in the bacterial as well as in the cancer condition. On the other hand, this helper cell is divided into Th1 response, Th2 response, Th17 response. Okay, and here we'll be talking about the antibody, the biosimilar available for each cytokine or each immune cytokine will be seeing that. Okay, so as a result, this is very important background slide. For example, when a person is having the bacterial infection, and that lead to cause a Th1 immune response. When a person is having the worm infestation or intestinal helminthic infestation or allergic phenomena or asthma, and that patient will have a Th2 dominant response, indicating that this Th1 and Th2 act like a balance. So in a healthy individual, Th1 and Th2 should have a complete in the balancing way. If Th1 go high, that indicate that the person developed an infection, especially a bacterial infection. And if a person is having more Th2, indicate that the person developed a helminthic infection or allergic phenomena kind of. So because of this phenomena only, basically what happened, this not only is like a balance, this Th1 try to reduce Th2 response, and Th2 try to reduce a Th1 response kind of like this. This balance, basically the balance is missing here. So basically this is the entire phenomenon. Basically, when a person is having more Th1 response, they develop a little incidence of asthma and allergy. On the other hand, when the person is having kind of more Th1 response, they may have a tendency to develop an infection kind of thing. So because of that only, is a very surprising controversial fact. Generally, many infectious diseases are very common in developing countries like India and China. But in contrast to increased incidence of infectious diseases, India will have a lot of reduction in the incidence of allergic diseases. But for example, when you see India, only 3 to 5% of the individual develop asthma and allergic phenomena. But in case of US, United States, and other Western countries, approximately 10 to 30% of the individual have this allergic phenomenon. This is a very huge gap. Why this India is having that less immune response? Thanks to because of this Th1 phenomenon. Because in Indian setup, we were grown in a muddy environment. We are not much worried about the hygienic condition. Maybe after the COVID-19 condition, I think we also got aware of hand washing all the time. But initially, we were not having this kind of condition. As a result, from the childhood, we developed a strong Th1 immune response. As a result, the strong Th1 immune response is sufficient to reduce Th2 response. It will prevent the incidence of asthma, and this is called hygiene hypothesis. But before COVID-19, in United States and Western countries, they are very well aware of this hygienic condition. The moment if they have a mild fever also, immediately they take antibiotics. Meaning they didn't allow to develop a Th1 immune response. So as a result, they have a very poor Th1 response. As a result, they will have a lot of incidence for the allergy and asthmatic diseases. And here you can, so by this phenomena, and this is called hygiene hypothesis, we can explain why there is a less incidence of asthma and allergic diseases in developing countries like India. And in this immune response, cellular immune response, as I told you that there is an innate and acquired immunity, depends on the exogenous irritant. Immunity is different. And as I told you that when the person is developing an infection, this Th1 response. Th1 means here I'm going to introduce some of the cytokines called interleukin 12, interferon gamma, and these are all responsible for the Th1 response. On the other hand, Th2 and mostly interleukin 4, interleukin 13, interleukin 5, 9, these are all coming under Th2 response. So basically, Th1 mean infection, bacterial infection. Th2 means allergic phenomena. Th17 generally it is common for autoimmune diseases. Many of you understand what is autoimmune diseases, called like starting from type 1 diabetes. You know that type 2 diabetes is a kind of metabolic syndrome related to kind of sedentary lifestyle kind of thing. But Th1 diabetes is a childhood diabetes. Many childhood diabetes belong to autoimmune disease. And other than that, there is a systemic lupus erythematosus, rheumatoid arthritis, a number of autoimmune diseases. In these diseases, Th17 is predominant. Okay, so I'll give a brief introduction about the asthma. Okay, so when suppose if the person is having an allergic tendency and they are exposed to the allergen, that will be taken up by a presenting cell, antigen presenting cell called macrophage. This macrophage digests, as the name indicates, macrophage. Phage means eating. So it will digest the allergen. Allergen is a kind of protein, and that protein will be digested to generate a peptide. And this peptide will have an epitope or antigen. That antigen will be presented to the naive T cell. Naive T cell indicate that T cell had never exposed to the antigen. The moment it is exposed to the antigen, this naive or Th0 cell is converted into Th2 cell. And this Th2 cell secrete a number of cytokine. So cytokine is a kind of protein secreted by cell. So cyto means cell, kine means movement, because it moves from vessel to the site of injury. That's what cytokine. Meaning this Th2 cell starts secreting Th2 cytokines like interleukin 4, 5, 13, and many other things. You can see that this cytokine like interleukin 4, 5, and 13, 19, and all. And each cytokine is responsible for every feature in asthma and allergic diseases. Very importantly, this IL-4 and IL-13 is responsible for conversion of B cell into the plasma cell. And that plasma cell will start secreting the immunoglobulin E. Once the immunoglobulin E is generated, what happens? This immunoglobulin E, here you can see that this little perfect slide for the entire phenomenon of biochemical pathway. Allergen is presented by antigen presenting cell that convert Th0 into Th2, that starts secreting IL-4 and IL-13. This IL-4 and IL-13, with the help of IL-4 and IL-13, B cell is converted into plasma cell, and that secrete IgE. And that IgE will bind to a receptor called IgE receptor that present in the basophil and also eosinophil. As a result, what will happen? The cross-linking of IgE and IgE receptor called Fc epsilon receptor in the presence of allergen, and that lead to cause a degranulation of the basophil and the eosinophil. As a result, this degranulation lead to release a number of pro-inflammatory mediators, including the histamine. Now you understand that why we take antihistamine like medication for this allergic phenomena. Once this histamine and leukotriene is released, and this histamine and leukotriene released, that bind to a histamine receptor and leukotriene receptor that present in the airway smooth muscle. And this is the airway smooth muscle. And inside the airway smooth muscle, once this histamine and histamine receptor activated, and that lead to increase the calcium. So there will be increase in the intracellular calcium. As a result, it leads to activate a pathway. I mean, that means that increases the calmodulin. That calmodulin lead to go for calcium binding. As a result, MLCK, that is called myosin light chain kinase, is getting phosphorylated. And this phosphorylated myosin light chain kinase is responsible for the smooth muscle contraction. You can understand that this is the entire phenomena. Now you can understand that how exactly allergen exposure leads to a conversion of T cell into Th2 cell that secrete cytokines like interleukin 4 and 13 that is responsible for the secretion of IgE. How this IgE bind to a receptor called IgE receptor or otherwise Fc. To understand this Fc for the common this antibody structure Fc epsilon receptor, and that this binding along in the presence of allergen that will cause a degranulation and releases number of pro-inflammatory mediators like histamine, leukotriene, prostaglandin, and this histamine, leukotriene, prostaglandin bind with the specific receptors like histamine receptor, leukotriene receptor, or we can say leukotriene receptor, present in the airway smooth muscle that increases intracellular calcium that initiate a pathway called myosin light chain kinase. Ultimately, this myosin light chain kinase due to contraction, and this contraction is nothing but a kind of difficulty in breathing. So once the airway is contracted, difficulty in breathing. So now you can understand the entire phenomena. Okay, and now coming back, traditionally for asthma, there's a 5 steps that are there in the medication. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. If a person is basically the asthma patient is divided into mild, moderate, severe kind of thing. So in case of mild kind of not persistent asthma, occasionally people get that kind of asthma. They get only the step 1 and step 2. Primary choice for this medication is a bronchodilator and inhaled corticosteroid, and both are having a lot of side effects. Basically, when you see the asthma, approximately 80 to 90% of the patients are happy with the available medication. So they don't need extra medication like a biology. But when the biological therapy is coming in the picture, in only in 10 to 20% of the individual, you can understand that almost 90% are happy with the available medication. And that 10% are not happy with the available medication. Even they receive available medication, they are not working properly. So when the research indicated that why these people are not responding to the traditional medication, then they understood that predominantly whoever is responding to the available medication, mostly eosinophilic inflammation. Whoever is not responding, mostly neutrophilic inflammation, or otherwise we can say steroid is not working in that condition. But in fact, when you see the only the kind of 10% individuals, the why we need to care about the 10% individual. But when you see the financial burden that because of asthma for the global as well as Indian level, almost 80 to 90% of the financial economical burden is because of only this particular person. And whatever the people dying are not from the 90%, only this 10% lead to cause economic burden, mortality, and morbidity kind of. So as a result, we need to focus on this one. And these particular individuals are the candidate for the biological therapy. So when you see the biological therapy, primarily is coming like IgE monoclonal antibody. And the monoclonal antibody against a number of immune cytokines like interleukin 4. There are biological therapy available for interleukin 4, interleukin 13, and interleukin 5 as well. One side, interleukin 4 and 13 is responsible for the IgE generation. On the other side, IL-5 is responsible for the survival of the eosinophil. Okay, and that eosinophil in the presence of IgE also releases cytokine and leukotrienes and all. So now you can understand that, and this pathway where the monoclonal antibody therapy can work. So primarily IgE receptor monoclonal antibody or IL-4 monoclonal antibody. Okay, so when you talk about this recommended biologics, now as I told you that severe asthmatic condition, only severe asthmatic patient are a candidate for this biologic. When you see the biologic, primarily the omalizumab. Okay, so omalizumab is a kind of humanized monoclonal antibody. Some patients also are responding to IL-5 antibody. So it's called mepolizumab, reslizumab, and benralizumab. Basically, the benralizumab is nothing but it's working on IL-4 receptor directly. In addition to that, there is the IL-13 antibody therapy that is called lebrikizumab and tralokinumab kind of thing. Sometimes alone, only IL-13 antibody is not working. There is a drug called dupilumab, indicating that dupli means it's a kind of double. Basically, this monoclonal antibody simultaneously inhibiting the signaling pathway of IL-4 and IL-13. So, in addition to that, there are many other antibody, but primarily using this omalizumab. Omalizumab, I think the patent got expired long time back. So as a result, there is a number of biosimilars available for this omalizumab. And before understanding this, all this monoclonal antibody, by the time you understand that what is monoclonal antibody, this is a little different from the polyclonal antibody because we use a specific technology called hybridoma technology. So as a result, this monoclonal antibody will be specifically working against a particular epitope. Okay, and this is called monoclonal antibody. And maybe you may have a confusion why this is called, was the name. So sometimes we call omalizumab, sometimes IMOB. So you can understand that the naming has been given for this monoclonal antibody in this way. For example, if it is a murine antibody, OMA, all the antibody ends with OMA, indicating there is a murine antibody. Generally, it will not come to the market because of the completely murine, and that will be specifically useful for the kind of murine research kind of. In addition to that, after murine, there is chimeric. So chimeric, indicating that this portion, the gray portion, would be kind of human, and this portion is kind of blue color is a murine kind of thing. So basically, this chimeric antibody also can be useful for the human diseases. And this chimeric antibody will have a lot of, unwanted immunological phenomena. As a result, people started inventing the humanized. So most of the chimeric antibody will end in the name of Shimab. Shimab means chimeric antibody. And many humanized antibody, Zumab. Now you understand that why it is called omalizumab. All the Zumab is that UMAB or like humanized antibody, a little bit, yeah, murine component will be there, very little bit. But a fully human antibody is a MUMAB. Okay, MUMAB. And now you understand that what is the type of monoclonal antibody. Now I'm coming. Now, how exactly this IG omalizumab is going to work? So now you understand this phenomena, IgE. Now, if we give omalizumab, it is going to neutralize IgE. It will prevent the binding of IgE with the IgE receptor. If the binding is inhibited, and that lead to reduce the signaling of this IgE and IgE receptor, and there will be a reduction in the secretion of all inflammatory mediators that are responsible for the bronchoconstriction. As a result, a prevention of this IgE signaling will lead to reduce the bronchospasm, will lead to increase the quality of the life in severe asthmatic patients. Okay, and that is about the omalizumab. Okay, so now I think now you see the omalizumab. Basically, it was invented. Basically, this is the originator product invented by kind of Novartis. So Novartis launched a long time back in 2003 in the name of Xolair in FDA, like US FDA, and the same medicine got approved in by European Medicine Agency in 2005. So obviously, once the patent got expired, then it lead to, pave the way for the development of biosimilar. Okay, so basically now you understand that this in 2016 the market range for Xolair is 835 million US dollar. That indicates the wide range kind of. So that is a good kind of commercial target for many biosimilar producing companies. And then patent got expired in 20th June 2017 and 2000 in Europe as well. So as a result, this after this 2017 June and August 2017, that paved the door for the development of biosimilar for omalizumab. Okay, and in fact, once you develop a biosimilar, by this time you understand that it is not like a generic. Just you do the pharmacokinetic dynamic and directly you go for the clinical trial. But when you start the clinical trial for this omalizumab, we need to start from the scratch. As I already said, unlike generic drug, these drugs are manufactured inside the cell, and that is a complicated process. So we need to start from functional, because you understand the monoclonal antibody is a very structurally complex compared to the generic drug. So as a result, we need to focus on each and everything. In between, there is some problem is there in the genetic sequence, the entire thing will be collapsed. As a result, first and foremost, we need to see once the antibody is developed, we need to verify the structure. The structural characterizations should be performed, and then functional characterizations should be performed. And very freshly, we have to start all the pharmacokinetic and dynamic properties. And finally, we need to worry about safety, efficacy. Basically, biosimilar, you understand the name of the biosimilar. The entire property, starting from the structure to the efficacy, the entire property should be demonstrated by comparing with the reference product. Basically, this omalizumab product, even in India, people have used this omalizumab biosimilar and compared with the omalizumab as a reference drug. Basically, we need to we need to assess all the parameters, starting from pharmacokinetic, dynamic, and does not be significant difference in any of these parameters, starting from structure, function, PK, PD, and safety, efficacy, and ultimately efficacy means it's a reduction in the symptoms, percentage reduction in the symptoms. Everything should be similar to the kind of thing. And in fact, we can see that in the CTRA, people have demonstrated how this omalizumab biosimilar behaved similar to the innovative product called omalizumab in moderate to severe persistent asthmatic. And here you can see that this omalizumab biosimilar compared to reference product. Basically, once you give how to check the efficacy in asthma, there is a questionnaire called asthma control questionnaire, in which there are a number of questions, like there are like 42 score is available, and if there is a kind of good score indicating that good lung improvement, there is a reduction in symptoms, and a poor score indicating that there is a reduction, there is no much improvement kind of thing. Here I think they found that this omalizumab biosimilar behaved very similar to the omalizumab biologic in severe persistent asthma. So this is the clinical efficacy. So in addition to the clinical efficacy, and we need to check like pharmacokinetic and dynamic. And here you can see that they developed. This is a study product. It's a kind of biosimilar, and this is a reference product by a kind of omalizumab as such. They compared. Okay, so there is excellent response obtained in 15 kind of 21% in case of study. Reference product is 37. So it should be basically there should not be any significant difference between all the parameters. So how to check the pharmacodynamic property? What happened? Basically, what happened? There will be a free immunoglobulin will be roaming around in the asthmatic patient. Huge amount of immunoglobulin E. The moment you give either omalizumab or omalizumab biosimilar, there will be a reduction in the levels of free IgE, and that is called free IgE. So here you can see that. So after giving the product, there will be a reduction in the free IgE. In contrast to the free IgE, and this omalizumab or omalizumab biosimilar will be bind to IgE, and that is called total IgE. The kind of compound IgE will be increased, and ultimately this compound IgE lead to the neutralization of the IgE, and thus reduce the IgE response kind of. And this is a pharmacodynamic property, meaning when the person is launching the biosimilar, we need to start from the scratch. All the properties have to be validated for a proper successful launch. And there are multiple omalizumab biosimilar are there. In addition to its use in asthma, it is also recommended in therapy-resistant allergic diseases. What is therapy-resistant allergic disease? As I told you that there are a number of medications available for allergy, anti-allergic medications, starting from either bronchodilators or corticosteroid and all. These are all the immunosuppressants. When the primary immunosuppressions are not going to work, and that opens the way for the biologic. Sometimes this biologic is a kind of potential medication. So this biologic is not only useful in asthma, but also in therapy-resistant urticaria. So urticaria is nothing but kind of skin allergy, or you can say atopic dermatitis. And this omalizumab, as I told you that IgE is a common denominator for all the allergic diseases. As a result, this omalizumab and omalizumab biosimilar are useful in number of allergic diseases, including asthma, urticaria, rhinosinusitis, generally the therapy resistant condition. Here you can see that there is a company called Generium. They develop biosimilar in the name of Genolair. Okay, that is also currently in the market. And the Glenmark Pharmaceuticals that also introduced a kind of candidate called GBR 311, sorry 310. That is also a omalizumab biosimilar. And Sorrento Pharmaceutical introduced STA 004. This is a company called Celltrion. They also conducted the clinical trial for biosimilar recently. And Biosana Pharmaceuticals, they also introduced biosimilar. And in Core Bio, they also introduced. And in India, you can see that Reliance Industries had introduced this omalizumab biosimilar in the name of Omalirel. You can see that Reliance Industries have many monoclonal antibody and recombinant proteins as a biosimilar in their basket. So this is about omalizumab. If a patient is not responding to the omalizumab in case of asthmatic condition, and there is a possibility that people can go for IL-5 monoclonal antibody therapy, okay, and IL-13 monoclonal antibody therapy. But unfortunate thing is like when IgE antibody was introduced in the market in 2003, number of patients started using this IgE, because ultimately IgE is a final product and IL-5 and IL-4 in the upstream product. So basically IgE antibody, many people responded. As a result, even many people did not go for even for the clinical trial for the IL-5 and all. The moment people started responding, and after a particular time, those people did not respond. Then people started thinking about, can we use monoclonal antibody for other cytokines like IL-5? So as a result, IL-5, IL-13, IL-4 and all, and not launched long time back. This just, I think it is in the process, some are launched kind of thing. So as a result, there is no way for biosimilar for at least for 10 years. Maybe after 10 years, some of the biologic patent get over, and then that will open the way for the biosimilar. But anyway, I think this is a kind of other Zumabs. Basically, this is the kind of humanized antibody that focus on eosinophil. There is a mepolizumab. Basically, the mepolizumab bind to the IL-5 and it will neutralize IL-5. If it neutralizes IL-5, even the eosinophil production will be increased. If the eosinophil production is increased, even though there is a high amount of IgE, but still IgE may not work in eosinophil because eosinophil has to degranulate to release histamine and prostaglandin. That's what is called mepolizumab. In addition to the mepolizumab, there is a drug called reslizumab and benralizumab. So this directly working on IL-5 and this benralizumab working on the IL-5 receptor. Basically, both does the same job. In addition to the IL-5, there is a here you can see that this mepolizumab, as I already said, very recently only they started launching this kind of medication in the Australia, USA, and Canada. Now you can see that the patent will expire after 7 to 8 years, and then only it will open for the biosimilar. In addition to the IL-5, as I told you that there is the IL-4 and IL-13. So IL-4 and IL-13 that is called dupilumab. As the name indicates, dupli, indicating that it simultaneously inhibits IL-4 and IL-13 signaling, and that dupilumab, people have started using this dupilumab for kind of severe or moderate to severe atopic dermatitis. Okay, and people are, by using this one, asthma, atopic dermatitis, chronic rhinosinusitis. So all these therapy-resistant allergic conditions can get benefit from this kind of dupilumab. As I told you that just I think 2017 only the US FDA approved this dupilumab, indicating there is a long way for opening for biosimilar. And as I told you that how exactly this dupilumab is going to work, it will neutralize both IL-4 and IL-13. As a result, and even the IgE generation will be reduced, and you can see that the airway contraction is reduced. structural changes also will be reduced. Okay, so here I stop at the level of the asthma. So I'll give a brief presentation about the sarcoidosis. In sarcoidosis, a condition called is a kind of as the name indicates that sarco means flesh, meaning it's a kind of very soft. Oid means like. Okay, it's a soft like condition. So sarcoidosis is a kind of many people believe that it's a kind of autoimmune, but it's not autoimmune. Initially, many people believe that it's a kind of post-tubercular immune phenomena kind of thing, but still nobody had come to a conclusion why this sarcoidosis is coming, and it is kind of manifested by multiple granuloma. You understand that the granuloma is part of the tuberculosis. Because of that only they try to connect with the tuberculosis, but they failed. Okay, sarcoidosis is an entirely different phenomena. Okay, and basically it is like a development of soft and then the non-caseating. The casea means that the soft tumor is getting lysed. Okay, as a result, it will be converted into cavity. That happens in tuberculosis and pneumonic condition. And here, in case of non-caseating, it will be soft, but it will not be converted into cavity kind of. This non-caseating granuloma occurs in multiple sites in the body. Okay, predominantly the sarcoidosis patient die because of the pulmonary component, and that is called pulmonary sarcoidosis. In addition to the pulmonary component, there are almost head to foot a number of organs getting affected. One of the phenomena called this butterfly rash, that is also coming in SLE, that is systemic lupus erythematosus. And pulmonary sarcoidosis, it will have two components. One is a soft granuloma inside the lung, kind of parenchyma. In addition to that, there will be enlarged lymph node will be available. Based on this lymph node enlargement and type of size and number of granules, it can be graded from the stage 0 to stage 4 kind of thing. In stage 0, you can see no abnormality, followed by a mild level of lymphadenopathy, and moderate lymphadenopathy and pulmonary involvement. Ultimately, it will end up in the lung fibrosis. Patient may die of lung fibrosis because when the moment the lung fibrosis happens, the gas exchange units are converted into fiber-like material, and that gas exchange unit is not going to use for the gas. It will be completely like a rubber-like material will be there in the lung fibrosis. Okay, and a number of treatment modalities available for this pulmonary sarcoidosis, starting from clear regimen. Clear regimen is a kind of a combination of multiple antibiotics, starting from levofloxacin, ethambutol. As I told you that there is some kind of connection is there in the tuberculosis. People started developing like it can be used mycobacterial, antimycobacterial drug like ethambutol and rifampicin for this one. To some level it worked. So in addition to this antibiotic combination is called clear regimen, people started using a number of immune modalities like how to prevent the T cell activation. Okay, how to prevent the T cell activation? You can see a number of immunosuppressants. Okay, so mostly a primary immunosuppressant like corticosteroid, and secondary immunosuppressant and cytotoxic like methotrexate. A number of drugs are available. In addition to this drug modality, there is a kind of many cytokines are involved, so monoclonal antibody also involved in the biology. Primarily, people use this TNF-alpha monoclonal antibody called infliximab, and you can see golimumab. A number of TNF-alpha antibody is available, and ultimately it will reduce the incidence of kind of, you can see it will improve the symptom-free survival for the fibrotic patient or sarcoidosis patient. Now, when you see the TNF-alpha biology, and this is the TNF-alpha signaling, basically what happens, in fact, this TNF-alpha, as I told you earlier also, even in COVID-19, TNF-alpha was having a predominant component in addition to the IL-6 in the form of cytokine storm syndrome, indicating that this increased levels of TNF-alpha, it binds to a receptor called TNF receptor, okay? TNF receptor that lead to initiate and activate a particular signaling pathway, end up in activation of nuclear factor kappa B. And this nuclear factor kappa B is a kind of master transcription factor for the inflammation. So when you see the inflammation, and this is NF kappa B, the common term, the kind of master transcription factor, because a number of pro-inflammatory cytokine is are transcribed by this NF-kappa B. Basically, the moment you block this TNF-alpha, ultimately pro-inflammatory mediators level will be reduced. In the market, there are a number of TNF-alpha blockers available in the form of monoclonal antibodies, starting from infliximab, adalimumab. Remember, I was talking in the first slide, adalimumab, and certolizumab, golimumab, and etanercept kind of. And each TNF-alpha antibody is going to have a different combination. Okay, for example, infliximab, it's starting from IMOB, indicating that it's a kind of chimeric antibody, a partially human. You can see this Fc component, this antibody structure, and this is a kind of stable component. This is a variant component, and the variant component is called FAB, fragment for the antibody, and this is a constant component. Okay, only the antibody, there's a variable portion of the IgE, sorry, the IgG1 or G4, it will be mouse component, and remaining are the human component, and this is a fully humanized. Because of that, it's called UMOB. The UMOB means it's a fully humanized. All chains are fully humanized kind of thing. Sometimes the bagoylated antibody finding region is possible also. It is possible in the name of certolizumab. Otherwise, there is a etanercept. The etanercept is basically you see the drugs ending the name of cept means it's a kind of receptor blocker. Basically, it will block the TNF-alpha receptor. So basically, what happens in this infliximab, it will bind to the TNF-alpha. TNF-alpha occurs as a trimer. So this infliximab binds to this TNF-alpha trimer. As a result, it will neutralize. It won't allow the TNF-alpha bind to the receptor at all. As a result, the entire TNF-alpha signaling is blocked. Ultimately, there will be a reduction in the inflammatory cytokine production and the inflammation as such. So as a result, this TNF-alpha antibody therapy is very common in number of diseases. Okay, starting from you see that in allergic diseases, even in asthma, this pulmonary sarcoidosis, the TNF-alpha is a major component. In addition to this pulmonary sarcoidosis, I mean many other diseases, starting from Crohn's disease. Okay, this is also autoimmune disease, ulcerative colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, a number of inflammatory diseases are getting benefited by the infliximab, provided they are not responding to the kind of traditional regimen, like a drug regimen kind of thing. So basically, the infliximab was launched by Johnson & Johnson and Merck in the form of the Remicade, and the FDA approved is August 1998, and you see that kind of in 2014 only, $9.3 billion. That is a kind of market range, and the patent expired in 2018. In US and Europe in 2015, indicating that paved the way for generation of the biosimilar. As a result, a number of companies in the world generated their own biosimilar, starting from, you can see that the Ausola by Amgen Pharmaceutical, BCG, and Remsima. Now, you can see that a number of pharmaceutical things are available to target this in kind of TNF-alpha in the form of biosimilar. And as I told you that the moment you talk about biosimilar, even for biosimilar, we need to worry about this kind of efficacy and safety. Here there is a study in severe sarcoidosis, and they compared like this. You can see that this is a reference product, and this is a biosimilar. So when comparing to the reference product is nothing but infliximab, Johnson & Johnson and Merck, Remicade, you can see. And they compared with the Inflectra, and they almost similar response they found. Here the excellent response 30%, and compared to 45 and 30%, here 39, 35. It's a kind of it's no kind of statistically significant. As a result, people started recommending severe pulmonary sarcoidosis. People start recommending infliximab biosimilar after this patent expiry. Slowly, I'll give a brief. I mean, basically, these are the major drugs available for these lung diseases. And COPD, as I told you earlier, COPD kind of currently is the third leading cause of death. Okay, but the problem is still there is no target-oriented therapy is available. Mostly whatever available medication, mostly symptomatic therapy like bronchodilators, immunosuppressant like corticosteroid. But like asthma, there is no pathway had been discovered in COPD. If there is no pathway discovered, there is no target also. target also. As a result, people are like, trying to find a very difficulty in reducing the COPD mortality. As a result, currently it's a kind of third leading cause of death, that is because of COPD. Unlike earlier hypothesis, earlier people believed that only cigarette smoke and other smokers smoke lead to COPD. But in Indian context, a number of COPD patients develop even without cigarette smoke, thanks to because of the increasing air pollution, because of the factory, and you can understand the Delhi smog condition kind of thing. In addition to that, the women, village women also develop COPD. They don't have any history of cigarette smoke or BD smoke, and still they develop because they are using this cooking fuel for a long time. Even though the PM had introduced this, free gas system, but still, I think the people refilling need money. As a result, that also partially failed. I think they are reviving it's a kind of 2.0 version. Let's see how this is going to happen. But still, a number of people use this biomass fuel kind of thing, indicating that COPD currently a major burden. But unfortunately, we don't have a particular pathway. We don't have a particular target. If there is no target, how to go for the target-oriented therapy? Then you forget about all this antibody therapy. Basically, COPD is a kind of inflammatory disease, but a particular pathway still is not discovered. As I told you, a number of inducers starting from cigarette smoke, infection, and indoor pollution, occupational exposure, all lead to conversion of normal lung into COPD. Basically, COPD is a kind of, this is the definition. You can see that kind of inhaled noxious particle gases. And this is two major components. When you see the COPD, one component is chronic bronchitis, as the name indicates, bronchitis. Inflammation. Itis means inflammation, bronchi, the airway. So there'll be an inflammation of the airway. So as a result, what will happen? This inflammation lead to cause a cord blood cell metaplasia, called the copious amount of mucus, that means sputum will be produced. That is because of this particular phenomenon called chronic bronchitis. And second phenomena is called the emphysema. Okay, emphysema means there'll be alveolar collapse. So assuming that alveolar is like a grape, and so you see each grape is like alveoli, it has a boundary. So assuming that this boundary is collapsed, 5 to 10 grapes become a single alveoli, and there'll be air trapping. So air will come inside, it cannot go outside. So as a result, there'll be a hypercapnia. So because oxygen has to replace the carbon dioxide in the blood, but there will be accumulation of the carbon dioxide for a long time, and this leads to hypercapnia and hypoxemia. If the hypercapnia and hypoxemia is happening, oxygen is required for the full function of the body, including the skeletal muscle. As a result, because of that, there will be a fatigue all over the body. So as a result, people start considering COPD is not a simple lung disease, it's a systemic disease, because the oxygen is getting down regulated. As a result, the entire body is getting affected by the COPD. And the therapy available for, as I told you, the therapy, mostly symptomatic therapy, starting from bronchodilators. And the bronchodilator, there are many medicines like starting from beta 2 adrenergic receptor agonist. It's called, we can say, SABA and LABA, short-acting bronchodilator or long-acting bronchodilator. And recently, people started introducing the muscarinic antagonist, diatropium bromide kind of thing. But still, I think there will be a therapy-resistant COPD. So in that condition, people started trying that whether the biological therapy can be involved or not. So even in fact, people tried TNF-alpha antibody therapy, but it didn't work, indicating that TNF-alpha also may have a minimal component in this COPD pathogenesis. But still, people are working. But beautifully, very recently, people started discovering that you see the market size COPD patient when people started using the generic drug, not a biosimilar. When the people started using the generic drug, they saved a number of $1 billion, $8.5 billion in a particular month or year, I don't know. You can go through. But that indicates that is a wide market for the COPD. Unfortunately, there is no biological therapy available. Recently, people started discovering like a subset of COPD patients mimicking like asthma. Okay, and that is called eosinophilic dominant COPD. And that subset of patients is having this IL-5, more IL-5, that means eosinophilic component is there. The moment eosinophilic component is there, there is a hope for the alpha antibody therapy. I was talking about the mepolizumab and alpha thing. So as a result, people started discovering that even the subset of subset of COPD patients may get benefited by this alpha antibody like mepolizumab. And so people started using this mepolizumab and this benralizumab. Both are alpha receptor blockers. So basically, there is no hope for biosimilar in COPD. Probably when this drug is already available, I mean, this mepolizumab and benralizumab, and they recently launched 2016-17, and there is also biosimilar will be open maybe after 6 to 7 years. Okay, and some slides I'll show for the lung cancer. You know very well about this lung cancer. I'm not going to do much detail, but one thing is very important, that because cancer means is a growth that needs a lot of blood supply. So you mean for the blood supply you need a VEGF. It's called vascular endothelial growth factor. Okay, one of the therapy available for the lung cancer is a VEGF monoclonal antibody. Its name is like you can see the bevacizumab kind of thing. There is another one is a receptor blocking. Okay. And once this monoclonal antibody or this kind of receptor blocker is able to neutralize VEGF, as a result, VEGF cannot bind to this VEGF receptor, and this receptor binding lead to activate a signaling pathway. Ultimately, the tumor will grow. Okay, but the moment you give blocking this VEGF, there will be reduction in the blood supply to the core part of the tumor, and there will be kind of tumor reduction will be there. Okay, VEGF, and basically you can see that this is a kind of vascular growth. Like Avastin, the Avastin is a kind of biologic for, otherwise called bevacizumab kind of. So when the bevacizumab is introduced to the cancer condition, basically this the tumor get less blood supply. As a result, what happens? The tumor size and tumor will be killed. Kind of. Okay, and this FDA approved bevacizumab biosimilar in 2017. That means it launched. The bevacizumab is launched long time back, but the patent got expired in 2017. And then I think, in fact, that this is a very first. You can see that you may see in the US FDA website, the FDA approved a first biosimilar for the cancer, and that is the kind of Mbasi kind of thing. And in fact, it's not only applicable for the lung cancer, it also is applicable for the multiple cancer, starting from colorectal, brain, kidney, cervical cancer kind of thing. And in fact, when they got this this Mbasi approval, they had all the data. You can see that starting from structural, functional characteristics, animal study data, pharmacokinetic, dynamic, immunogenicity, clinical safety, all the data is very similar to starting from the scratch. So we need to work for this biosimilar starting from the scratch rather than like generic drug. So how this another biosimilar was launched in June 2019. That's Zirapeo, FDA approved again. After 2 years, is another drug is approved. And in addition to this VEGF for the lung cancer, other target is called PD-1. And this PD-1 is nothing but programmed cell death. So basically what happens in the cancer condition, any cancer condition, the T cell will activate. Okay, T cell will be activated, and the activated T cell is sufficient to kill the cancer cell. Somehow, in a severe cancer condition, this T cell activation is inhibited by the expression of PD-1. Okay, programmed cell death kind of thing. And that inhibitor signal lead to increase the kind of cancer growth. But people start developing that. It's called immunotherapy. In fact, 1 or 2 years back, Nobel Prize was given to this PD-1 immunotherapy, indicating that when you discover an antibody that inhibits the checkpoint, there are 2 checkpoints. One is a CTLA4, another one is a PD-1, programmed cell death protein. And what happens? This inhibitor signal is inhibited. As a result, T cell becomes activated. So activated T cell is sufficient to kill the tumor cell. So that's all the cancer immunotherapy. So in this, many drugs are there. One is called Sintilimab, IMAP. Basically, it's a kind of chimeric antibody, and Puplap. I mean, basically recently it got approved in the non-small cell lung cancer, and you can see that this basically sintilimab is a immune check inhibitor antibody, and this immune check antibody was able to reduce the progression of lung cancer. I think you can see that this is basically the first drug, the bevacizumab biosimilar is available, but they combine this biosimilar with sintilimab, indicating that so far we don't have a sintilimab biosimilar, but there is a biosimilar available for the bevacizumab. They combine the bevacizumab biosimilar with the sintilimab, and also this biosimilar should be combined with other chemotherapeutic regimen like platinum-based therapy regimen kind of, because this biosimilar alone is not going to work, and it has to be combined with the existing kind of chemotherapy like platinum chemotherapy, and then only the kind of, you can see that it's a kind of symptom-free survival or progress-free survival kind of. So with this, I stop my presentation. So if you have any question, thank you.